Good evening, everybody, and welcome again to another edition of Champions Network TV, your platform for powerful conversation, fresh perspective, and bold ideas that matters to the diaspora and the world over. I am your host, Misha, and today we are diving into a very important topic at the heart of Africa, Africa Day. What does that mean? We will hear it from the panelists. This topic touches and raises questions about the relationship between Africa and the global north that challenges us to think critically and act with purpose. We are honored to have a diverse, insightful panel today to break this powerful topic. We have got Soko in the house. We have got Dr. Matiza, very experienced in the historical matters. Jenna, a very insightful man. And we have got Mr. Makabai all the way from Uganda. We're having a perspective from Uganda. And we have got Moses in the house. He is also of Ugandan origin. So without further ado, I give the opportunity to Mr. Matiza to start us off on this important topic. Welcome, Dr. Matiza.
Welcome to the panelists, people that are sitting on the panel. Mija has just given us the topic that we are going to be discussing today. It's all about Africa Day, where we are trying in this discussion to find out what that means to us, one as Africans and two as the continent of Africa. You realize that the roots of this day can be traced back to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, 25 May 1963, where a number of African countries met for the first time, taking over from possibly another idea that had prevailed before, but an idea which was generally hindered by the fact that most of Africa was not yet independent. Of course, starting with Ghana in 1957, and in 1952, about 16 African countries also became independent. Nigeria included as one of the British colonies, but mostly the colonies that were there were French colonies. So that wave of independence that was coming to Africa was then supposed to be replicated all over Africa, and this was one of the main reasons why the meeting had to be convened in Addis Ababa. So basically, this is what we want to look at, to say, why was the meeting convened? What really did they want to achieve? Have we achieved it so far as Africa where we are? And if not, what is it that we are supposed to do? So, Mija, I guess I can then open this discussion to the floor. Just like you have said, anything that we would want to talk about surrounding that topic to become important in adult learning and adult discussions. There's nothing that we call a wrong answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matize. You have given us the historical perspective, and I think the question still remains: what was the objective of the Africa Union on 25 May 1963? And have we lived to that objective? If not, where have we at? Oh, the floor is open to the House.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. I'm Henry Makabai from Uganda. As we reflect over Africa Day, which at one point in time was referred to as Africa Freedom Day or Africa Liberation Day, the issue is the initial objective was to check on the progress of the liberation movements and to ensure that all the other countries that were still under colonialism got liberated, got independence, and then the continent would start moving on as an independent continent. Whereas this meeting was held in 1963, I think there had been a precursor to it. There had been a Congress of Independent African States that had been held in Accra in 1958. And at this one, there were about 6 countries only. You had Ethiopia, Ghana itself, and Cameroon, which at that time was referred to as the Union of the Peoples of Cameroon. I think Libya was also part of that. Now, the 1963 meeting was to build on that because now there were more countries that had gained independence. And the issue really, like I said, was to champion the liberation of the entire African continent and to bolster support for other liberation movements. So, of course, the issue is then, are we liberated? Because that was the focus. Over time, we have come on to, we passed essentially that stage with a number of countries by the 1980s. Zimbabwe, I think, got independence in 1980. Then, of course, there was the issue of South Africa that ultimately got liberated around 1994. Then again, we had the issue of South Sudan that was more or less under a colonial setting. And that also got independence, was it in 2011? So at the end of the day, by that date, almost all these countries should have gotten independence. Then, of course, it has been evolving. The objectives of the Union have been evolving to the extent that we have reached a point of, without doing much assessment of what we set out to do before, we have now the Agenda 2063, a far focused 2063. But I don't know whether we have appropriately taken stock of what gains, what challenges we've had from 1963 to date, and to whether we can go into the 2063 agenda. So that's what I can briefly talk about for now. As probably maybe I'll talk a little more about what is under the Agenda 2063. It's some ambitious thing that my observation is that Africa sets out grand plans, but whether we think about implementing them and working together to implement them is another thing altogether. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Magabai. Very detailed with a lot of questions. He sets up a 100-year period, 1963 and 2063. What goes in between the floor is open.
You're on mute.
Jane, you're on mute.
Oh, yes. Can you hear me?
The guy is serious.
Okay, I just wanted to say before we go so much into the topic, I think on the questions that the gentleman is asked, important that we understand what is it that we call liberation, and then we look at what are the parameters for measurement. How do we measure the success of the liberation? Because I had in that discussion where he pointed out about those two things, to say liberation and progress. I think if someone can elaborate on those, that how we measure that liberation and what is it that we call liberated.
Yeah, that's a very I would call it a very topical issue, because like Mr. Makabai has said, this was coming from the basis of the Ghanaian independence in 1957, when Nkrumah said the liberation of Ghana was meaningless unless it is linked to the liberation of the whole continent. And then there comes a very important question to then say, from what angle were we looking at African liberation? Because today, someone can still assert that African liberation can be summarized as the liberation of the national anthems and the flags, where we are free to sing the national anthem and where we are free to raise the flag, but where we are not free in respect of the economic resources. In respect of the economic resources, the issue that you are seeing on headlines these days, where Ramaphosa actually took a delegation to Trump and they were discussing whatever they were discussing, but does that really relate to economic independence, would be the question we can be interested in asking.
Yeah.
What do you?
Another 10 there. Yeah. Soko, go on.
I think when they did all these meetings to create Africa Day, they had objectives they needed to achieve. If they've been achieved, if we reviewed, because from what I know from being a child from the village, Africa Day was a day to just brew some traditional beer and cook some traditional food and meat, and people just drink. We didn't hear about these objectives or aims or what they want to achieve as Africa Day in the village. My question is, have they reviewed since 1963? Have they reviewed these objectives, and have any of them been met? And if they've been met, what's the next objectives? Well, what's the next goals we are looking at? I don't. Do they meet every year? Do they actually meet every year? And do they review these things, or do we just drink unkomboti and be happy? I'm just asking, and I don't know. Mr. Makabai, welcome back. Thank you for coming back. We missed you.
Yeah, we missed him. And I think there's a very powerful word there. Soko is saying there is a day. Who are they?
The leaders, I think, because they are the ones who represent us at this forum. Our leaders, the presidents, so to be specific, presidents and heads of government delegations that go to this. Like you said, that meeting essentially showcased the progress of the liberation movements. What progress were they making? What were the challenges they were having? And then it was also a symbol of the day was meant to symbolize our need to free ourselves from foreign domination and exploitation. Now you are saying, really, how far have we moved on that? Regarding the liberation movements, the liberation where we can have the flag hoisted and sing a national anthem, I think that one we have scored very highly. Where we can say
we sing very, very well.
Seems to be liberated. Now the real gist of it was freeing ourselves from foreign domination and exploitation. I think that was the real core thing. That probably after we had freed ourselves from directly rule from the colonialists, then we needed to move on to free our economy. Like if you interacted with some people in South Africa, whereas many Africans say that Nelson Mandela was a hero, there are those who are saying Nelson Mandela was a villain. Why? Because he compromised for political leadership and at the sacrifice of political independence, at the compromising the economic independence which the African needed most. And that's how the likes of Chris Hani get into trouble and get killed, because they were hard on the matter of economic emancipation rather than just the cosmetic political emancipation that we always rush for. So when you say how far have we gone, I think we have hardly gone anywhere, because our resources are still exploited by the same foreign forces. We are still dominated. We are still being lectured to as to how best we should manage ourselves. And we, I must say, are still challenged. And yet, we have again set ourselves another range of objectives, like I said, under the Agenda 2063, where we are talking about speed trains, where we are talking about constructing a particular dam, not dams in the continent, but specifically expressing ourselves that we shall construct this dam instead of dams wherever they should be needed. You see? So we are still challenged. But what causes this challenge? When we got this independence, I think.
Okay, just to cut you there, I just want to compliment you on what you started talking about. The example that you gave of South Africa. I think if you look at South Africa, the issue is that in South Africa, the Africans were actually pushed far back or far away from, I can actually say, to humanity. the apartheid was a tool which was actually then used to make sure that they don't, the Africans,
Humanized.
yes, are dehumanized. As a result of that, and the length of time that it took during that apartheid period, the people were actually destroyed in their minds. Their mindset was totally shifted to the extent that what they thought would mean liberation would be to get to places, for instance, where the blacks were not allowed. For instance, I can give an example of there's a place that is called the Waterfront in Cape Town. No black was allowed in that area. So, because of the mindset that was developed developed in them, they thought that being allowed on its own, just being allowed to move from the black township to a colored township and to a white residential area, they thought that that was liberation, that was independence. And to the extent that they forgot that no, there is actually something which is more important than that. Hence, you find now they didn't focus mostly on the economy. So the economic power was then used to keep on stifling them and keep on also dehumanizing them.
Mm.
Mm.
So now
Okay.
we are setting this goal for 2063. That's like coping out because by 2063 we'll all be gone.
Yeah, I think it's a polite way of saying all of us must die and
Yes,
uh, die
yes,
without knowing what would
yes,
have happened.
and
Yeah.
without even because even if we don't achieve anything, the 2063 people will be looking back and saying, "So what did they do?" They can't ask anyone because we'll be gone. Honestly, this is like copying out, isn't it? I mean, 2063, our leaders in Africa, if we look at our leaders in Africa, they are all in their 70s, 80s, 60s, 60s.
Mm,
The youngest
mm,
are in
mm.
their 60s. So by
Yeah.
2063, they'll all be gone. So what
Mm,
kind of goal is this? They're going to sit back and just die. And then
yeah.
this goal won't be achieved. But honestly, guys, this is why I don't like politics. I really don't like
Yeah.
politics because it gets me riled.
And
Yeah. Let me.
Moses, what's your opinion on this? We setting the 2063 when we are in our afternoon of our life.
I feel like similar to what Soko said, and Dr. Matiza definitely is. It's them now passing the repercussions on to the grandchildren now. So
Mm,
they're gonna
mm,
enjoy whatever they're enjoying, and then the grandchildren will pick up the mess, basically.
Unfortunately, those grandchildren, if you look at the gap that we have with our children and then the grandchildren, those people are a different kind of animals. To say they can speak and try to fulfill those objectives set in 1963, to them, they don't even want to read that because it doesn't even apply to them in their way of life and what they actually think.
um. Thank you. I wanted to. I would want to address this very important point with a bit of reference to the Zimbabwean history. Um, you realize that Zimbabwe is one country that went through a protracted war of liberation. When Ghana got independent as way back as 1957, Zimbabwe had to endure it up to 1980. And look at the time difference between the two countries' independences, you see something. South Africa was to enjoy it up to 1994, even more years than Zimbabwe had taken to get independent. But I would tell you that our white counterparts standing outside Africa and looking at Africa as a country that, as a continent that was only still rich in resources, having exhausted resources in America, in India, and Africa remained as the only country that was untapped in as far as resources were concerned. They nicknamed it the Dark Continent because not much exploration had been done in Africa. So because of the resources in Africa, whatever efforts we did as Africans did not go unnoticed by our European conquerors or colonizers. My example with reference to Zimbabwe is that a lot of conferences had been convened with the aim of ending the war in Rhodesia. You can talk of the Geneva Conference, Kariba talks, the 1978 internal agreement, discussions between Ian Smith and Abeon, Bishop Mzorewa, Chikerema, and all that. But you will realize that Margaret Thatcher, who was the British Prime Minister by then, realized that settlers were losing the war in Zimbabwe, and that Zimbabwe had the potential of turning out to be a communist country the next day if the gorillas were going to win the war. So there was this plan to stop the war before it was won by any side. And Thatcher was behind that, because if the war was going to be won by the gorillas, it meant Zimbabwe was going to become economically independent. And now that there were British companies in Rhodesia, companies like Londro, companies like Lever Brothers, and if Rhodesia was going to lose, then those things would fall in the communist hands. So that explains possibly the coming of the Lancaster House Conference as a killer idea to stop the war and return Zimbabwe in a state that would remain friendly to the capitalist world. So you will find that this has generally been the trick around Africa. A united Africa, as was being pushed by the OAU, or what we are calling the Africa Day, was going to be a direct threat to European interest on the African continent. And this had to be diluted. So they couldn't just watch you guys do what you were doing, which they knew was going to take them out of this equation. So they made an effort to make sure that if you look at the independencies that were being given to African countries, most of them were given, without liberation struggles. 1962, about 16 African countries were given independence. 1975, 25 July, Mozambique, Angola were given independence by Portugal unconditionally. Look at Zambia, look at Malawi, the independence came on a silver plate. And this was meant to portray a picture that they had been given independence. And yet, on one platform, they would then say, if we knew Africans only wanted political independence, we should have given it to them long back, because they made sure that the umbilical cord that tied the North to Africa remain today is either neocolonialism or some form of hidden imperialism like we are doing today. So basically, we are talking of the Africa Day as a day which is supposed to bring African countries together, just like what happened with the United States of America, bringing in the 52 states, 50 states of the United States, plus Alaska and Puerto Rico coming to 52. Because of that unity, they are very strong today. This is why you would find USA is a strong country. And this is what we wanted to do as Africa. And they didn't want that to happen. So in a way, they kept on interfering in the way we wanted to do things, because surely they still needed the resources that were in Africa, having been untapped so far up to the Berlin Colonial Conference of 1884. So whatever failure we have had in terms of African unity and productive unity was not very independent of what our colonizers wanted us to be. They made sure they did not go very far away from us, and that we continued to enjoy meaningless independence, which is what President Traore is trying to challenge today, to say, I think we need independence with reference to our resources. And the Africa Day that we need to be talking about should be an Africa Day where we have our animals back, where we have our land back, our minerals back. And if we have total control of that, then we can say we have our Africa back. But you will find that most of the leaders have ceased to want to represent us, and they want to be in power just to see themselves go through. This is why they even put time frames like 2063, like what Soko was then challenging, to say, what kind of plan is that? How does that help me and you when we are already in the twilight of our lives? They just want to make sure they go through their own periods and leave it like that, with us still suffering. Therefore, the agenda of AU, or the agenda of the Organization of African Unity, remains a far-fetched idea, because our leaders don't really represent us. That's why Soko is saying they, and Makabai was then saying we. You see, it's like they feel they are going, and they are happy to go, leaving it like that. And whoever remains will face the uphill task again.
Dr. Matiza, I think now you've given another example. That time I was talking about the South African example you gave. And I can talk a little bit, talk about the Zimbabwean example that you have also given. And at the same time, bear in mind that I am still maintaining the same point of our emotional damage and our what has happened to how our brains were twitched. If you look at this the settlement, because when we say go back, we are going back to when, because that timeline, there are so many things that has been happening, of which we have been made to believe that this stage is the back that we can go, and we feel happy with that back. You see, because if you look at the older times, where we had everyone settled wherever the person wanted, that's another period. Then there was a period when the whites came, they moved the people into the tribal trust lands, right?
Yeah. Always
He's,
freezes sometimes.
he's eating honey now. When he freezes, he's eating honey.
Right. I wanted to pose this question. If Shumba was here, He is an advocate of institutions.
Yeah.
We are talking about this Africa, and this is what they wanted to achieve in 1963, and they are propagating to have this in 2020. Do we have institutions that will make sure those agendas are come to fruition? And what vehicle are we going to use to make this a reality?
I think the African Union has a commission where you have technocrats who should be providing feedback to the relevant ministries of foreign affairs for the trickle-down effect of some of these decisions. Of course, the goals that are set out in the Agenda 2063 are goals that can still be realized within part of our time frame that we are on Earth, although they have certain flagships that they talk about. Now, of course, economic development, that's an aspiration of everyone. So you cannot say that's your goal for 2063. Economic development, as we are seeing in Burkina Faso, is not something, as long as one is focused, as we see, I think, like in Malaysia, as long as one is focused, these are things that can be realized in a few decades or in even a decade or so. But is the commitment there? It's all about setting very grand aspirations, dedicating zero time to realizing them, then going back the next year. It's kind of cyclic. It's like it becomes rhetoric, because if the moment we decide to move away from rhetoric, from sloganeering, then that's when we shall be doing Africa a service. But as long as we set out very beautiful aspirations that we do not work towards, and then you talk about political integration. In one of our discussions before, I talked about the issues of the African Union and then having regional blocks, first concretizing them, then the regional blocks concretize. But like Doctor has said before, I mean, you find that any efforts for you to integrate will definitely face a very fierce whip. It will be like a kid who has stayed out for so long playing, and you've come very late, and your mom has been waiting for you to take a bath and gun, and you will be whipped for thinking about integration. The whip is always very ready. Now, improvements in democracy and justice. I personally work in the democracy sector. I work with the Electoral Commission. We held a by-election
It's 100
recently.
years before time. It's in 1963. In 1963, we are talking about, there were cars. The fastest cars were going at 80 kilometers per hour.
Now they
And
go
you
at
set
past 200 kilometers per hour.
and then you set a goal that in 2063 we must have a car that will be traveling very, very fast at about 100 kilometers an hour. And you then see you've set a goal.
And when we talk about improvements in democracy, the reality is that democracy is declining. Whereas we are aspiring to have improvements in democracy, you find really the indicators are that the democracy is declining. Are we committed to having that improved democracy? I was citing a case in my own country. There was a ruling today where over an election which I presided over, and then they were forced, goons and organized in a certain, came and destroyed materials. And I was faulted for not securing election materials when the election officials were being hit with stones. I wondered how they would have secured those materials in order to be able to add up results of 14 polling stations to cause maybe a tilt in the balance. That was a ruling today, and it was an interest. Actually, I delayed to come online because I was trying to go through the 50-page ruling. And anyway, I was just saying, well, if there is a by-election again, I ought to be excused out of it because the same circumstances are likely to prevail, and then you have a cycle of by-election after by-election. Then the issue of establishing security and peace on the entire African continent. That is a good aspiration, but you find that it is we, some of the same African countries, that cause insecurity in our neighborhoods, to our neighbors. So if we are doing that, you will always find if there is a rebel group, they will say, well, they are having asylum in the neighboring country. Now, where is this commitment to ensuring peace and security when we could be harboring people who are intent on toppling a government next door? So these are all things that we need to look up. Of course, then the issue of strengthening cultural identity through African Renaissance. Well, we have already, like he said, we have been mentally drilled into thinking otherwise to the extent that we look at even the most, we have similar dialects. I remember one time I was attending a course at the University of South Africa. And then here I had some people, I passed by a hotel reception and they were talking about one of our classmates who was
when people are bringing powerful contribution,
uyo anenge akupiwawo uchina jena futi.
Yeah. But you see, that time it was me, I was freezing. But I hadn't I had not finished the story of about our timeline, where we said some people were then put in keeps. Makipi memory. So for that person from keeping, when you are said you've been liberated, you might think that maybe going to the tribal trust land is better. And you think you are not fine.
Yes,
Or
you are very right, Jenna. I actually got what you were saying when you gave the example of 60 kilometers to 100 kilometers.
Yeah.
To say people would celebrate that achievement. 60 to 100, and the difference is 40 kilometers per hour. But this 100 kilometer per hour car is being classified as very fast. You see,
Yes.
when 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 it's not even more than what they were doing at 40. You also mentioned the two examples I have given of South Africa and Zimbabwe. You will realize that those two countries were being colonized by one powerful British South Africa company under the chairmanship of Rhodes. So what really happened in South Africa exactly happened in Zimbabwe as it had happened in South Africa. For example, the Land Apportionment Act in South Africa came in 1911, and it was followed by the creation of Bandustans, or what they called homelands. Bakutotswana, KwaNdebele, Ciskei Xhosa, KwaZulu, far away from white areas, which were the city centers. When that came to Zimbabwe, it was in 1930, and it created the first act that governed the distribution of land in Zimbabwe, the Land Apportionment Act, which pushed Africans into poor reserves in terms of what the soils would produce, and gave all white land on fertile lands on the middle veld and on the high veld. Africans were pushed in the low velds as far as Dande, an area that was really reserved for animals, because the distribution of land in Zimbabwe had three categories: white land, reserves, and um, unassigned areas, those low velds. So, like I have been trying to put across, the whites never really let us loose, even if they gave us the so-called independences. These were the independence of the national anthems and the flags, but we were never given the economic independence, which is what Mugabe was trying to do. Of course, he really didn't do that out of his own wish, but he actually hijacked a revolution that was on its way. When the Soswe people invaded neighboring farms in Marondera claiming to have nowhere to stay, Mugabe realized if he was to go against that, he was going to cut short his stay in power, and he rode on that wave, which was the first real example of trying to distribute resources to the people who deserved it. I remember in his famous speech, the Blair, keep your England and I keep my Zimbabwe, Mugabe was saying everything else comes from the land. And if people are going to develop, it has to start from the land, which has not happened anywhere else on the African continent. People simply took into what was known as the colonial economies, and they just slipped in those shoes of those economies and continued as if that's what they had wanted. When in actual fact, all railway lines had been created to take away resources from Africa to the coast so that they
Yeah.
would go out of Africa, you see. But we then got into those shoes and assumed that's the economy that we had found there. When in
We
actual
call
fact,
that back. We said we have gone back.
yeah.
Let's hear from Moses. Let's hear
Moses,
from the young people.
Moses has been quiet, has been listening.
So I've
But
been
Yeah.
before,
listening. I've been learning, just taking it in really. But I believe Makabai has been breaking it down quite well for me. So I'll kind of go. I'll speak. I'll try and give my own small input. But yeah, for me, what I can see maybe some of the more positive stuff is maybe for us in East Africa. We have the East African Treaty, which basically improved relationship with our neighbors, you know, in terms of Kenya and our few neighbors. But again, like Mr. Makabai said, there's issues where your own neighbors. So you've got the case of Rwanda, where the rebel group has been linked to them. The rebel group in Congo has been linked to Rwanda. So sometimes it's your own neighbors who are causing the issues for you and delaying your own progress. In my country as well, we recently got a direct flight from Britain to home. So I believe for me, that's improved connectivity, and it will allow us expatriates or us in the diaspora to now gain motivation to go back home and, you know, or made it easier for us to travel back anyway and reintegrate with our homeland as well. But yeah, outside of that, maybe even the Burkina Faso thing. I believe that again, the French indirect rule is very strong in that they're using that monetary system of the franc to control a lot of those West African countries. But again, Burkina Faso is now fighting back and trying to really reshape that monetary system. And I believe they've now come up with a new kind of monetary currency there. They're calling it the echo. So they're moving towards that where they will have more control over the currency. But yeah, that's it. That's it for me. That's it for me.
uh, let, let's welcome Shumba, just joined us. We have been discussing, and there have been some varying opinions, and I think it all hinges on where are we going as a continent. There's these two dates, 1963, where the first Organization of African Unit was started, and now we have got Agenda 2063. And the question is, have we achieved what was the agenda in 1963? And I think a lot of things has come up with what is happening. And let's hear your view, Shumba.
Welcome,
Yeah,
Shumba.
thanks. Yeah, so I think I was in and out of the meeting. I was just trying to listen to what you guys were saying. So I caught some of the things that you were saying, actually. So I think, setting dates of progress, it's not bad to say you can have a 100-year plan, you can have a 50-year plan, you can have a 30-year plan. But what matters most is whether you going back to say, have we achieved what we aim to do? So what we see, the tendency is just to set these dates, but nothing is being accomplished. I think that's where the problem comes. So for me, I think, like Misha said, I'm a big believer in institutions. But unfortunately, one of our major institutions in Africa was hijacked, which is now the African Union. It used to be called the Organization of African Union. This was hijacked purposely because they realized that the mindset that Nkrumah, Mugabe, Nyerere, to name just a few, had was a radical transformation of Africa. So they didn't really want that, and they came with this plan of AU. I always say, in whatever we do, let's follow the money. So go to the budget of AU and see who is the major contributor to the AU budget. I think it's the US and France. So if they are giving so much funding to our own affairs, it means they drive the policy to protect their interest on the continent. So we need to, those are some of the things that we need to think about when we look at the geopolitics of Africa. Africa is a convenient place for raw materials, not only raw materials, but human resource. I think the human resource, considering there's 1.4 billion of us, is going to be of paramount importance going forward. Because if you look at the demographics of the world, Africa is one continent with the youngest population of any continent. You listen to some of the debates that are going on in the Western world, they are saying their populations are actually shrinking. And Africa is the only continent that is growing population-wise. So I think those are the issues that then I think it worries them, and then they see, how do we control these large populations? I think Dr. Matiza said, if you look at the structure of the colonization of Zimbabwe, it's a template for the way they've always controlled the world. You have the British South Africa Company coming in. They knew the ratio of blacks to white people. So they had to create that divide and rule method, because if you keep these people united, they'll overwhelm the white population within that has just arrived. So you had to create divisions amongst the tribe so that they are always at each other's throat. So some of the issues that Moses touched on, to say like Rwanda and DRC, it's just a creation. It's just this divide and rule politics. But because now we lack leadership in Africa to tackle these matters, then these issues are exacerbated, and as a result, we keep on dwelling on things we are diverted from the real issues and focus more on what divides us. So it's always about the DRC and Rwanda, who is doing what. But if you look at it, the actual fact is the fight for raw materials. Right now, I think I always tell people that we are in where we are in history. It's I think years to come, historians will write with the period that we are in. But when we are in that period, we don't understand what's going on. The thing is, the world supply chains have broken down. So America is going its own way and China is going its own way. I think the real fight in the DRC is not between Rwanda and the DRC. The real fight is between China and USA. So that's why you see USA, Biden, before he just left office, he went to Angola to commission the opening of the Lobito corridor, which is a corridor from DRC to the Angolan port. And then China has got already the Tazara, which takes minerals from DRC off to Dar es Salaam. So that bifurcated world is what is worrying the Americans, because they want to control China's access of raw materials in Africa. So today I was actually writing an article in which I said the next leader to fall might actually be the Tanzanian leader, because if you can see the propaganda that's going against here, it's because they want to stop the Chinese influence in Tanzania and stop the Chinese getting access to the raw materials in DRC through the Tazara Railway. So they have to create an opposition leader in Tanzania who will fit their bill. This has always been going on all around the world. And we as Africans, we need to wake up, because sometimes we react after things have happened, if you know what I mean. We are always behind the times, because all we hear here, we were colonized, we were enslaved. But what is it? Why don't we learn that? How did they come to always think ahead of us? Like right now, there is an issue of me. I personally think we are now going into an era of digital colonialism, whereby the large platforms, things like Starlink, we think it's for our own benefit. That's why even Musk is trying very hard for Starlink to get into South Africa. Once that thing gets in, it's a national security threat to those who really understand the art of statecraft, because all your data will be owned by X. And after X owns your data, the American government have got access to that data. So the CIA can do whatever it wants using your data.
You're muted, Shumba.
Yeah, so they know Zimbabwe better than you know yourself. So we are going into the era of digital colonialism. So I think this would be my contribution. And yeah, it's quite topical, but we need to plan. The plans, the idea that we can have 2063, it's fine to have 2063, but you have concrete plans, you have pragmatic plans, you have the institutions working to say this is what we're going to achieve by 2063. And you take the populations along with you. You take the young people along with that vision to say, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And the young generations, they are actually seeing those things being delivered. But at the moment, I remain skeptical, because I don't see any delivery. I think it's just words that we get to be told now and then, but no delivery.
It's also because when they say 2063, is it broken down into, let's say if you've got a 5-year plan, you break it down into small achievable goals. Okay, 2063, we see it, we like that. What are we doing in the meantime to achieve it? Are we achieving that? Like, say, in 2 years, we should have done this. In 3 years, we should have done this. In 10 years, we should have done this in order to achieve that big goal. Because you can't just reach a big goal without achieving the small goals in between. And what Makabai said about, and Dr. Matiza said about us being a people of slogan chanting. We don't understand all this at all. When they say Africa Day, we go and we eat and we drink. We don't understand what it even means to us. Because once we chant our slogans and we sing our national anthem and we get a cap, maybe a free cap or a free t-shirt, we are done. We don't try to understand what it means for us. Economic freedom, what is that? Because last time Mr. Makabai was here, he said, unless as Africans we achieve economic freedom, we are not going anywhere. Because how can someone without the resources threaten you? Let's say I grew up in the village. The person with the borehole is the person with power. He can wake up and say nobody's getting water from my borehole. How can someone without a borehole set terms for the person with the borehole? I'm talking. I'm giving examples of small things that we can understand, but that I can understand. You know, when you have got the resources, you are in power. But not when it comes to Africa. We have got the resources, but we are still bowing down to Trump and Britain, and we're still bowing down. But we have got the resources.
Yeah, so
thank you, Soko. Let me just come in, Mr. Diva, before you come in. I'm happy you have actually buttressed what we have been saying, to say we really have not escaped the chains of our colonizers. We still have a umbilical cord that ties us to the north, as that cord that ties the mother to the child. And that is the cord that sucks from us as the people with the resources by those who do not have. They have not just left us free. They intermingle and they come in so strong in our institutions in a manner that allows them to remain in control. Who funds the AU? You have actually shown us that it's the United States. And if it funds the AU, what does that mean to our objectives as the AU? It means whatever we are going to do is got to be associated with the mother, who is then the colonizers. We call it the Neocolonialism, where you are saying resources are moving through the Tazam railway line and this and that. That's very true, because most of the railway lines are not meant for us to visit our relatives, but they run from areas of resources to the coast, which is simply a way of saying our resources are going out. So as Africa, even if we would want to divide our tasks into achievable objectives within a shorter period of time, we always have this infiltration that comes with the Starlink story that you are talking about, where the data is owned by people who are outside Africa. Whatever we do is becomes privy to them in a way that they then remain ahead of us. This thing is real. It's not a paper tiger at all. It's a real tiger. And we need to really be very liberal about it if we are to go anywhere. This is why you would find that people like Mugabe, people like Malema, people like, they talk, but we don't seem to understand what they are saying. Like what Soko was saying, "Kutikangodya nyama When we eat meat and we drink beer and get a free cap, then we think we have celebrated Africa. But we won't be going anywhere. We are really fighting a real war. It's not yet over, even if it means we are not having gunfire and this and that, but we are in a war with our colonizers, and they would never let us go because of the resources that we possess. Soko munogona kuti imi mune bhoho, ini ndokuti mvura yacho iri mubhoho yangu. So you and me tiri wairi tinoona bhoho racho iroro. Imi mune bhoho. If I ask you to say bvisa bhoho renyu ndoda kusara nemvura yangu, imi moti bvisai mvura yenyu ndoda kusara nebhoho rangu, tozoona kuti hazviite kuti tipasanure zvinhu izvozvo. We end up taakutongoti ini nemi tinoona bhoho iroro tese.
The thing is, these powers,
But,
they give us crumbs.
but with that
And we are
analogy,
so
yeah,
happy to receive the crumbs. As Africans, we are so happy to be given crumbs. Like Black History Month, Black History Month, is it Black History Month? And we are so happy to celebrate. I am an author, and I'm international bestseller, whatever that is. And they ask me, they say, "Oh, come read your book for Black History Month." I said, "No," because who is allocating me as a black person a month in a year? I've never heard of White History Month. I've never heard of it. They've got the whole time and they give us a month and we are jumping up and down because we are being given. What does that mean to us as a people? Because we are the people who were the first people to be. And then we get given a month and we are jumping up and down. And people didn't understand that. My community hated me for saying no. Because as a people, we are so happy to be given little. And we celebrate that little. We give meat and beer, and we are happy with meat and beer. And Black History Month, oh my God, why is the White History Month? How come they get 11 months? I get one. And we are so happy. We don't look at these things properly because when they throw these crumbs to us, we are happy, we are jumping up and down. But we don't think about why are they giving us this crumb? What's going on? That's to cover our eyes. You know, in the white community, they're saying that you can't piss on me and tell me it's raining. You know, we need to keep our eyes open and look at exactly what is going on. What are we being given? For what reason? Because people think, oh, China is helping us. Oh my God, no, they are not. Everyone who comes into Africa have got their own agenda. Everyone who tried to help us have got their own agenda. What is the agenda? They are taking resources from us. And we don't see that. We are so happy. Oh, they built a bridge. Oh yes, we can cross our cars. Oh yes, it's now safe to cross to go to visit my mother. But out of that bridge, how much have they taken? We do not look at these things at all as Africans. I don't know. And I'm so happy we are having these discussions now because we need these discussions to open our eyes. Unless we get economic freedom, we are just following behind and we are being thrown crumbs. A dog at the table, you get bones. After they finish eating, you get bones. That's what we are getting. We're getting bones that have been eaten. All the meat is gone, just bone. But we
go on, Jenna, and then I'll come after you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you are coming back to the issue that I was talking about to say we've been greatly underprivileged to the extent that what we accept as good is far much less than good. And somebody mentioned about the leadership. I don't know what happens with these leaders. Here we've got, like, I'll take instance here in Zimbabwe. We've been maybe there was the third biggest producer of flue-cured tobacco. But what we've been seeing is that all that tobacco has been going out without a cigarette making machine in this country. Then we get the value added somewhere and then we come back in the morning and say, no, we are poor. Right now, I just discovered that this week, I saw a convoy of 30-ton trucks coming from a mine going somewhere. I said, don't they have a refining plant or what? And guess what I had? Those trucks go straight to Beira, to the sea, and that whole soil is gone. And that mine, they also two. One in Goromonzi, they produce about, was it 100 to 120 trucks a day that go out. Then I saw another one here in Guru. That one they said it takes about 70 to 90. 10-ton trucks per day. And what they say is in there, now we don't know whether it is, because there's no point in carrying ore out of the country. Why carry ore? So the leaders the people that must actually switch on and then say, no, we can't take the ore out, because there are so many things that are in that ore. They just claim on one mineral, yet there are a lot of minerals in there. Because if you actually look at that issue of someone taking 30 ton trucks per day, and then you say, maybe the ore is not rich enough. No, no one is that mad. Taking that oil to China, and it's going to China straight. It doesn't work.
So this is what I was talking about. I don't know whether it's the way, because if you wait for someone to define your political system, these are the problems that you get into. So one of the biggest problems we have in Africa, we've been told, practice democracy, practice this, and they monitor you as kids to say, no, you're doing it wrong, you need to do it that way. Look at the Arabs in the Middle East. Are they democratic? Look at China itself, Vietnam, are they democratic? They are not democratic. They are practicing what they've practiced maybe for hundreds or thousands of years. And that system works for them. We are not saying democracy per se is bad, but you need, if you say you want democracy or you want a monarchy or you want a one-party state, you've got to tailor it to suit the conditions you have in Zimbabwe, so that it delivers for the people, not for the leaders. So I think I had 4 things that I wanted to talk about. One is the control of our institutions in Africa. Like I said, you always follow the money. So with what happens in Africa, they've managed to sort of make sure they control the AU and all the institutions downstream. And then after the AU, you'll find in our countries, we are indebted using the IMF, the World Bank. They don't build bridges, they don't build the economy. When the IMF comes, it's always preaching about structural readjustment, debt restructuring. And those things are the ones that keeps you in perpetual debt cycle. And they actually like that kind of doing things, because when you are grappling with the debt all the time, you have got no time to focus on things that matter. And it's the London banks, it's the French banks, it's the American banks that are benefiting from the debt that we are saying we've got debt in American dollars. And then the second thing I was going to talk about is exactly what Jenna you are talking about. I've always said to people, read this article by this guy, Zoltan Polsa. He wrote an article called War and Encumbrance and Resources. He wrote this article in 2013. The things that he was talking about, unfortunately, I think in Africa, we don't have leadership, or even our economists, because they are Western educated. They've got the bias towards the West, and they lack that innovation of introducing economic theories that benefit us. When Zoltan Polsa wrote The War and Encumbrance of Resources, he actually said the most powerful countries that are going to emerge in this century are the ones that have got resources, because wars will be fought on resources. And countries that know how to manage their resources will emerge very, very strong. And which should have been particularly true for the whole of Africa. But because we don't know how to play this game, we become subservient to other people. Our sort of direction is defined by other people, not us. So what we should have been doing, if China comes to Africa, instead of saying pay us with the US dollar, we can say these resources are worth billions. So we want you to sort out all our roads instead of us giving the US dollar. Build us hospitals instead of giving us dollars. This is what Saudi Arabia is actually doing with China. They've learned this because all this knowledge is there of how you utilize your resources for the development of your country. And then the other thing I was gonna talk in particular to Zimbabwe. I think most of you remember when the gold coin was introduced in Zimbabwe, what the IMF said to the Zimbabwean government. They said that gold coin experiment needs to end. Why? Because they were worried that these Africans might open their eyes. We walk on gold every day, but we sell it for a piece of paper. Other countries are benefiting from our gold that we export, but we don't have even a minting facility in our country to mint gold coins, to mint gold bars. Go to Dubai, that doesn't produce any gold. It doesn't have a gold mine. Go to the airport and see how much gold you find there. Our people, they suffer with inflation, with things like with their pensions being destroyed by inflation. Yet we've got gold. This is why I think the leadership that we have, they don't understand these matters. Because even 2008, when the pensions of the people were wiped out, before that, the government could have bought a lot of gold to protect those pensions. Because gold has always been known from time immemorial that when there's a crisis in the world, most kings and governments, they revert to gold. But we work on that gold every day. We export it to other countries, but we leave ourselves vulnerable to economic pressures. You see? And then my last point is what should have been done, like Jenna, you were saying. I think after independence, Zimbabwe and South Africa, I'll take Zimbabwe and South Africa specifically, that there should have been an open borders policy immediately after South Africa's independence. But we didn't have that kind of leadership. Right now, if you see the xenophobia in South Africa, it's a result of populations not interacting. And as a result, what African leaders have done is they like their little fiefdoms. They are actually against the Africa coming together because they lose that rule over their little kingdoms. They are not for the people. All they want is to be, I'm president of this country, I'm president of this country. So if you say Africa, let's come together to be a united Africa, you are threatening their power base. So that's where the problem. And SADC as a whole, by now, if we really had people who has got statecraft innovation, I think by now SADC we could have been talking of it being one country with one currency. Because some of these countries we are talking about, I think Dr. Matiza emphasizes this point very well. If you look after when Rhodes was doing his experiment, what you'll find is Zimbabwe, Rhodesia was at one time part of the Union of South Africa. And then the whites in Rhodesia are the ones who voted in a referendum to say they didn't want to be part of South Africa. That's how Rhodesia became an independent state. But it didn't stop there. Soon after, you find that there was a federation between Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. This is also this is all experimentation in what? In statecraft. Can you tell me our leaders after independence, did they even try anything? Because these borders actually were deliberate when they were drawn to bring this chaos among tribes. They just tell you the border is here. There are relatives there. If you've been, I think Soko knows, if you've been to Forbes border post between Zimbabwe and Mozambique, you travel into Mozambique maybe 100 kilometers. The people are still speaking Shona. You see? So this was deliberate. You go to South African Zimbabwean border, the vendors are there in South Africa, they are in Zimbabwe, but they woke up one morning and they told the border is now Limpopo. You see?
Like
So,
COVID, the new normal was set.
yeah. So we need our leaders then were supposed to innovate to say these things were artificial. How do we sit down and rectify them? But nothing of that nature was done. As a result, now we leave ourselves so much exposed. As I always say, Southern Africa is the least populated region in the world. You look at Botswana with a population of 4 million, but almost the size of Western Europe. So for the Western mindset now, they just see heaven. They just say, oh, when things really get tough, we've got somewhere to go. And Africa is going to be in the middle of the battle that I'm talking about, because we are at a crossroads right now where we've got a declining empire America fighting with the rising empire China. So there's gonna be that friction, and we're gonna see a lot more than we have started to see at the moment. I think I'll end there. Thank you.
Yeah, this is I think this is a discussion that will not end in a day. As we can see, we are talking about South Africa, Zimbabwe, DRC. I think these discussions at some point need to put them in some geographical confines so that we can really dig deeper into those discussions. But as our time is not on our side, as our manner is, we come up with some key powerful statements. We know yesterday was Africa Day, and we couldn't come as a panel on the particular Africa Day, but everyone we had our contribution to this discussion, which is powerful and thought provoking. But I want to give each and every individual final remarks. One might want to speak to, we have always said, I think there's a lack of leadership. There is a lack of manageable milestones to say when we set objectives, how do we get there? We have been taken advantage of. I was listening to somebody who said the Francophone countries, when they were getting independence, there was an unfair agreement which was happening to say there will be a French general who will be resident in the former colony with the power to decide when they feel either the security of France is threatened, they can actually take over the radio and announce whatever they want. And there was no any a corresponding agreement for someone to have also the general of whichever country has been a former colony to say they also have got the veto to say if there is a security threat, they can also take over the French radio and announce whatever they wanted to announce. So, as a final remark, let's get our statement, what we are saying to either African leaders, the people of Africa, or if you want to speak to the colonized to say, hands off, you are free to do so. I don't know who wants to go first.
Well, I think I'll speak to some two issues. One by Brother Shumba and Sister Soko. One, Brother Shumba said the OAU was hijacked by the African Union. And to illustrate that, I want to say that under the Organization of African Unity, there was an effort for the Africans to free themselves from foreign domination and exploitation. How has this been hijacked under the agenda, under the African Union and Agenda 2063? They have watered it down to say our goal is to work for political independence from foreign powers. Political, we have struggled. We have the flags, we have our own parties and what have you. Why do they run away from the economic aspect, which is embodied in the domination and exploitation? Running away from what people thought about in 1963, watering it down. Then my sister was talking about, do we have any measurable timelines? Or let me give you a very interesting timeline of under the agenda 2063, where our African leaders sat and they set out to end all wars, civil conflicts, gender violence, and violent conflicts by the year 2020, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we should have, but how do you even come up with something on gender-based violence, which is rooted in culture, which is rooted in poverty, which is rooted in, and that should have ended by 2020. We are in 2025. Those are the interesting things that our leaders come up with. Then, of course, we aspire to have high-speed train network to connect the capital cities of Africa. These are the milestones. Now, you're asking whether there are any milestones that are supposed to be. We're supposed to have a single African air transport market under the Agenda 2063, and then cooperation on cybersecurity. Who controls the cyberspace? And yet we say cooperation on cybersecurity. It's really very interesting. And then, but there are more important things that we set out ourselves to do. Having an African investment bank, having an African monetary fund, an African central bank. In theory, those are very good things. But who will let you get to your own African central bank? Probably a single currency, and those are things that, if we really focused on, then we would make a difference as the African continent. We would be thinking that we are now on a path of growth, of independence. But for as long as we leave them on paper, I think the emphasis here is that we should walk our talk. If we do not want to translate what we put on paper, let's, I think, consider this a generation that has betrayed Africa and then led it to another generation. But there is a lot of good on paper. Emphasis should be, let us try to work towards that amidst all odds, because we know there will be resistance to that. And by the time we set that for ourselves, we should have known that's not very easy. So we should commit to that hard work to realizing what we set ourselves to do as a continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Makabai, Mr. Shumba. I think what you're saying is already being done in Europe. They've got the EU. It's an economic economic unity on so many countries now. They use the euro. They are all economically they're all working together. They've got their political independence. They've got their own leadership politically. But when it comes to their economic freedom, they are all working together. And they don't even use if you've got an EU passport, you can travel to any EU country. Why can't we do that? Okay, keep your power, that's fine. But economically, we don't have borders. Why do we still have economic borders? And Jenna was talking about processing. I think Makabai touched it the other time about why are we selling our ore? And if they are taking tons of ore, it's worth a lot to them. Why are we not processing our own ore? Why are we not processing our own products, resources in Africa? Because then the price of these products triples or even quadruples once they are processed, because then they are brought back to Africa for us to buy. So they take our raw material, take it to their countries, process it, bring it back and sell to us. Why can we not unite and start processing? Because then our economic freedom goal will be quite close if we start processing our own resources instead of just selling ore. The fact that they are buying the ore means they are doing something with it, which is much more. The fact that they are buying raw tobacco and processed tobacco, how much do they sell a cigar? But we are buying cigars. We've got people in Africa. We smoke cigars made in America, made in Cuba, made in countries. But that's our tobacco, isn't it? Most of it is our tobacco, isn't it?
Yeah. Jenna, do you have your final?
No, okay. Okay, I can just talk about 2 points about our benchmark. Our benchmark was shifted. And that shift in the benchmark, even when we say we must go back to the original. What we now call the original is not the original, because we've been shifted somewhere so that we believe that this is now our original. So it will take a while for us to understand where we really came from and where we really want to go. Then the second thing is about the time frame. Setting an objective for over 100 years, you never knew that there would be drones by then. These cell phones, even this cell phone wasn't there. And you expect to say the thinking of 1963 would apply to the activities that you must do in 2063. There must be something which is manageable, because the change is very drastic. It's faster than we thought it would be. I'll just say this now.
Yeah. Thank you. Moses, do you have your final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. I've learned a lot again. And for a final statement, maybe I would just like to say that in terms of summarizing, I believe, like Shumba said, as Africa, I believe we're ignorant to the game that's even being played. Because again, something that looks surface level, as I'll give the example of Rwanda fighting Congo. It's not really Rwanda fighting Congo. It's a proxy war between colonial states, and they're using Africa as a chessboard to play these games. So I believe it's a deeper game that is being played that we're not aware of. So I believe we first need to learn the game of power, gain power, and then attack these problems head on.
Thank you. Shumba, I don't know, you had put your 4 points. Did you want to say any final point?
Yeah, I just want to challenge young people like Moses to say, I think we are leaving this legacy to them. They need to really engage amongst themselves because sometimes I think our young generations, they are just lost. They've got a continent that doesn't function, and then when they migrate to these other shores, foreign shores, they are not really accepted, so they are caught. Me, I always say I believe in compounding of ideas and compounding of knowledge. So what happens is the more you start to learn more about what goes on, the more you start to know how the world works. So you need, first of all, you need to follow the money. Always follow the money. Before you just accept the narrative that's being thrown out there, follow the money. Who is going to benefit from this? And once you find that, then dig deep to say what's actually happening. Because what I like about our white folks, they are not apologetic when they want to do certain things. If they feel their interests are at stake, they will do whatever is possible to maintain the status quo. So they wouldn't mind. There's nothing called human rights. If you hear them talking about human rights, you know it's a flag for something that they want to do. They will tell you, oh, Zimbabwe is trampling on human rights. It's not that I'm saying we should mistreat each other. Zimbabwean problems should be sorted by us. We should formulate the politics that we want. And it's inherent in us that we have human rights already. We respect the right to life. So nobody is supposed to come from outside to preach you human rights. It's just us as Zimbabweans fixing our politics, us as Africans fixing our politics so that it works for the whole, not for the few. So my challenge is to just young people to say, start learning about the history of Africa. Start also learn to know how the West operates. It's deeper than what you see in the surface. So learn all that and see how it applies to Africa as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We know Dr. Matiza give us the opening remarks, and we give him the privilege to give us the last remarks. But before he does so, we had some engagement from the viewers. Lily, maybe you might want to respond to what she has said. Apart from SpaceX holding our data and America eventually owning it, they will covertly survey our land for rare minerals, as well as easily annihilate whole population to get hold of them.
Yeah, I think she just nailed it. I had to leave some of the things that I wanted to talk about to say. I think the naivety amongst us as Africans is always thinking colonization was just domination. It wasn't about domination. It was about getting rid of you. If you look at what happened in United States itself, the indigenous populations were wiped out. You go to Canada, Australia, even now, I think there was a referendum in Australia early this year, and they rejected the recognition of Aboriginal people in the constitution. You don't see Aboriginal people in Australian parliament. I lived in Australia for 2 years. You don't see them in parliament. They are there in the reserves that they had started to create for us in Zimbabwe and South Africa. And they are told, the narrative that goes out is they are alcoholics, they are drug abusers, but it's deliberate because you want to crush a people. So you put them onto alcohol, you put them onto drugs. So if you go to these societies in America, in Canada, in Australia, you see the same pattern. because you want to rob people of their land. It was going to happen to us. We're going to put in reserves, and then alcohol thrown to us, drugs thrown to us, and
and
the general, yeah,
they take
and the
away
general
any
do not own a farm.
and they take away and they take away any opportunities to learn
No.
for jobs. They take away all opportunities.
So if you read the book,
Yeah.
if you read the book called what's his name, Guns, is it Guns Missionaries or and what else? I'll give you the title. It's just escaping me. What you'll find, the only saving grace that we had as Africans was diseases that when the Europeans used to migrate from Europe to Africa, they would be wiped out with malaria, with all those tropical diseases. But for some continents, it was the other way around. If you go to America, the Americas, the diseases that the white people came with actually wiped the indigenous populations. But in Africa, it was the reverse, and that actually worked in our favor. But it doesn't mean it will always be the case. Probably one day it will wipe most of us, and because it's the resources that we have, and they feel like we don't deserve them, that they want.
And she has got a final comment to say. She believes we as Africans we can do well if we can work together and have a single currency. And before that, I then give Dr. Matiza to also give his
Sorry, Tak.
final.
Sorry, Tak. Could I just, before Dr. Matiza closes off, just for my own, I like Shumba, he's always referencing literature. So please, Shumba, could you give me at least a book? Because that's my thing now. I read books. So is there any book that can at least educate me, myself, on stuff like that, like the history behind those
Yeah,
geopolitical things?
so the author of that book is Jared, is it Jared Diamond?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
then you read the other book, the one that I will recommend, which I even talked to Dr. Matiza. I said, I want this book to be like a reading book in Africa. It's called The Price of Oil.
The price of
It
oil.
talks, yeah, it talks of the history of oil. And from there, you learn all the geopolitics that you can talk about, all the things you see happening in the Middle East. It's not by
Yeah,
accident. From Syria to Iraq to Libya to what? It's all there in the price of oil.
Yeah, and also
perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
to add on to that, Moses, I will also give you a number of top book titles as well, and even from the
Please,
panels, if they've
please.
got any books
Yeah.
that can help you, we can always and give you, and I will borrow you some of them that are some of which I have in my library. So
You do.
with
Thank you.
that, we give our learned Dr. Matiza.
Mayo, these are the words I got from one of our top football commentators, Charles Mabika. I think what we are basically saying here is the time has come for the horse to tell the rider to come off its back and stand on his or her 2 feet here. The relationship between Europe, between the rest of the world in short, and Africa has always been that of a horse and a rider. They appear to be so much in understanding of each other, and yet the horse is suffering in the process. So we are saying, as Africa, whatever we need to do, we need to realize that we need to take riders off our back and make them stand on their feet. And we look at each other as equals. This basically summarizes what we have been trying to say here, to say our other people don't really look at us as equals. Wherever, whatever, whichever, and any other evers you can think of, they don't look at us as equals. And whatever we try to do to make ourselves equals to them, they won't take it lightly. They will be there to destabilize through whatever means to ensure that we remain in colonial bondage and that we don't think outside that framework. Misha, thank you for giving me this time.
Wow, 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 wow. What an enlightening and thought-provoking conversation we have today on the topic Africa Day. And I can't thank our panelists enough, Dr. Matiza, Mr. Makabai, Soko, Jena, Moses, and Shumba. Your insights and experience and understanding of Africa is on another level. And I think this conversation need to go on. And as a final remark, we reflected on a number of things, but I just will summarize a few takeaways. Shumba has challenged the young people to begin to engage, and I think Moses has already began by having an inquiry about the books to read. Jenna has all reminded us that the benchmark has changed. So we need to be reflecting on those to say the time, the 100-year period is quite a long period. How do we know that at that time that will be the technology be? Mr. Makabai acknowledges that there has been a hijacking of the OAU agenda by watering down the objectives now to say having to reduce gender violence and not focusing on the economic liberation that the OAU had an agenda for. And Moses has agreed with Shumba, and his main emphasis was all the wars that we have in Africa, most of them they are proxy wars, citing the Rwanda-Congo conflict. And so, of course, as Africa, why don't we copy? It has been done with Europe. They have got an EU which is working. Why we just copy and paste what they have done and they implement it in our own environment? Why do we continue to send unprocessed goods to Europe? Our most valued tobacco, just to buy a cigar, which is quite expensive. And Dr. Matiza, just time has come for the horse to tell the rider to get off and be on their feet, so that our relationships are relationships on an equal basis. And Lily said, I will endeavor to join you next time. So Lily, the number you are seeing it on the screen, that if you just give us a text message, we'll give you a link to join us next time. And to our viewers, whether you are tuning in from across Africa, Europe, America, or beyond, we invite you not just to watch, but to engage. Drop your thoughts, questions, comments in the chat. this is your platform. So let's continue. Champion Network TV is an amplifying voices of Africa, giving it power for the future. From me, Meja, your host, we are signing off.